The following program contains intense violence and strong language that may not be suitable for all audiences. Viewer discretion is advised.
In America, the roaring 20s were coming to an end. Gloom and hardship had arrived. An apparition was knocking on the door. And to make sure you got the message, its unfriendly ambidextrous hand was writing on the wall. It seemed like everyone was filling out applications to be religious gurus, mystics, messengers, prophets, or gods. A religion called Islam, practiced in India by a man named Hazrat Mirza Ghulam, claimed he was the prophesied Messiah, would influence his right-hand man, Mufti Muhammad Sadiq, to spread the message of Islam in the United States of America. A black man that Sadiq would convert was a man named Timothy Drew, who renamed himself Noble Drew Ali. Drew's popularity would soon become known worldwide. Timothy Drew, who had left the Ahmadiyya movement in 1913 under the leadership of Mufti Muhammad Sadiq, would soon be as popular as the deported Honorable Marcus Garvey. Timothy Drew, who had changed his name to Noble Drew Ali, had started his own form of black nationalism and religion. By 1928, Drew Ali's movement had set up 17 temples in the United States of America. A young man named Wallace Fard, born on February 25, 1893, arrived in America from New Zealand at the age of 20 years old. Among his many aliases, he would be mostly known as Master Wallace Fard Muhammad. At the age of 24 years old, Fard worked as a cook in a small restaurant in Los Angeles. Within a year, he was managing the restaurant for its owner. He fell in love with a waitress, and they both moved into a small apartment together. The love affair didn't last long because of Fard's quick temper, his constant losing of money from gambling, and his drug use. On November 17, 1918, now at 26 years of age, Fard was working at a restaurant at 803 West 3rd Street when a gentleman named P.W. Gillibrand came in, ordered a meal, ate it, and then refused to pay for it. Fard lost his temper and pistol whipped Gillibrand into a bloody mess, knocking Gillibrand to the floor as he cowered and pleaded for mercy. The attack was so savage, Fard had to be restrained by patrons.
Help me!
If you ever come back in here, I swear to God, I'll kill you. When police arrived at the restaurant, Fard was placed under arrest. It was then that Fard admitted to the police that his real name was Wally. Fard was tried and convicted for assault with a deadly weapon. After Fard was released from San Quentin after doing 3 years, he joined what was left of Marcus Garvey's fading movement called the United Negro Improvement Association. From there, Fard went on to join Drew Ali's Moorish Science Temple of America. And though Fard claimed to be a black African, everyone in both Garvey and Drew Ali's movements thought Fard to be of East Indian descent. His facial features, dialect, speech, mannerisms were definitely not African. The extreme transition from former drug user and pusher to black nationalist probably puzzled Fard as well as the blacks he suddenly began associating with. Many wondered what was his real motives. Wealthy Jewish philanthropist Julius Rosenwald was known for making generous donations to African Americans on a continuous basis. Rosenwald's butler was a man named Claude Green, who was a member of Noble Drew Ali's Moorish Science Temple of America, who held the title of Sheikh. Rosenwald was unaware that Green was a member of the MSTA and purchased a building for Green. Green had misled Rosenwald about his real reasons for needing such a large building. The building at 3640 Indiana Avenue in Chicago's black community was instantly converted into a mosque and headquarters for the MSTA. The building would be called Unity Hall. It was in this building that Drew Ali's financial empire would begin. From the profit of membership dues and other means, Drew Ali had amassed enough cash to live a lavish lifestyle. He married many women and divorced them whenever he desired. When he stole a woman from Green's embrace that Green had his heart set on, Green's jealousy kicked into high gear. Green now demanded that Ali give him a raise in the MSTA's financial status. Green told Ali that if he couldn't fulfill the demand, he'd become a whistleblower and expose Ali as a con man and religious fraud. Green wasn't bluffing. He possessed the organization's financial records in a safe in his own office at Unity Hall. The bovine excrement was about to hit the fan. On March 14, 1929, several of Drew Ali's enforcers stabbed and shot Green to death as he was locking up the Unity Hall building. Drew Ali, though out of town at the time of the murder, was connected to the murder of Green and placed in jail. Bogged down with his legal troubles and his organization on the verge of collapsing, Drew Ali quickly placed David Ford L. in charge. David Ford L. was one of the 58 aliases that Farrakhan had used. With David Ford L. now acting as head of the Chicago Mosque, Drew Ali suddenly died. A power struggle over who would become the successor of the financial empire emerged. David Ford L. had claimed that he was the man that Drew Ali appointed to the title, but many gave him the thumbs down. A man who claimed to be God.
The Bible said, see, we know that Allah is God and we ain't gonna worry about it no more.
An assignment to a lost found nation of people and supreme wisdom lessons to solve the mystery of who was the real true God.
See, we are 5% of poor righteous teachers, poor righteous teachers, poor righteous teachers, poor righteous teachers.
So the Honorable Elijah Muhammad teaches us that Master Farrakhan taught our people, taught him that heaven is a condition and hell is a condition. Right here.
But we know he doing his job, while we out here to do a job also.
The one who claimed he was the supreme ruler of the universe, despite a history of criminal activity and an extensive arrest record, and one successor who claimed he was the messenger of God. It's the incredible science fiction-like story about the continuation of the spread of Islam with an all-new twist from Wallace D. Fard, a man with many aliases whose strange teachings spoke of an angry black scientist who attempted to blow up Mother Earth, and another dissatisfied scientist who would create a race of devils who would be given 6,000 years to control the world. The wearing of bow ties wasn't truly an original idea developed by the Nation of Islam. This attire adaptation goes back to Noble Drew Ali's Moorish Science Temple of America that predates both the Allah Temple of Islam and the Nation of Islam. Even the Nation of Islam's military Fruit of Islam uniform is a spin-off on the uniform of Marcus Garvey's Universal Negro Improvement Association. In November of 1932, Nation of Islam's founder, Fard Muhammad, called Elijah Muhammad from his hotel room and broke some very bad news to Elijah. The news he dropped on Elijah was about a Nation of Islam follower who went berserk and stabbed a man to death on a makeshift altar in his home. The man who committed the murder, his name was Robert Harris. His Muslim name was Robert Kareem. A book written by Master Fard Muhammad titled The Secret Rituals of the Lost Found Nation of Islam instructed all believers of the cult to stab people to death in order to gain religious rewards. Obviously, the author of such madness greatly influenced Robert Harris's actions. All the main newspapers of Detroit covered this shocking story, and the entire city of Detroit was completely shook up. A lunatic was on the loose. After the murder took place, Nation of Islam member Robert Harris calmly walked away from the scene of the crime. The house where this grisly murder took place quickly became known as the Voodoo House. When Harris was arrested, he told the police that he made a sacrificial murder to please his God, Master Fard. Harris was quickly declared insane and put in a straitjacket. Why did this man named Master Fard write such a book, asking for his followers to commit sacrificial murders to please him? The newspaper accounts said Fard, who was claiming to be a religious god, was a fake. He was actually a man from India. One of his followers, hell-bent on pleasing him, went bananas and took another man's life, killing him in a small house that would become known as the Voodoo House. The cult of the Nation of Islam was quietly guiding beneath the radar screen until this unbelievable crime took place. In later years, the Nation of Islam's leadership would blame Malcolm for bringing unwanted attention towards the cult. But the facts are, the U.S. government was watching the cult from the very day Robert Harris put the spotlight on them. The Detroit newspapers pulled no punches. They gave the reader a complete inside look into the practices of the Nation of Islam. Fard told the detectives that he was God, the supreme being on earth. He and another man named Yugan Ali concocted the whole cult. The man who went berserk and murdered someone named Robert Harris misunderstood my teachings, Fard told the police. Bernstein Sharif Muhammad was secretary to Master Fard Muhammad. She was born on July 14, 1915 in Robbinsville, Mississippi. Her parents moved to Detroit, Michigan when she was 4 years old. In October of 1932, her parents brought her to the Allah Temple of Islam that was located above a clothing store that was previously a small movie theater. The location was 3408 Hastings Street. Sister Bernstein, at age 17, had very good typing skills, so she applied for the job of secretary at the Allah Temple of Islam. She was given the title, the Reformer. The duties of Sister Bernstein under this title, Reformer, involved organizing temple activity, being treasurer and secretary to both Elijah Muhammad and Master Fard Muhammad. Bernstein Sharif Muhammad passed away on February 28, 2002. What's very interesting in the small pamphlet she wrote about some of her experiences while secretary to Master Fard Muhammad is the mentioning of the location of the temple being above a motion picture theater. Interestingly, an article by the Detroit Free Press in a caption titled, "Raided Temple Bears Grip of Voodoo in City," the article mentions that inside the temple, when the police raided it, were seats that the believers sat in that were described as motion picture theater seats. Was the temple located in a building that housed both a small theater and a clothing store? Also noted in Bernstein Sharif Muhammad's pamphlet on her experiences as secretary to Master Fard Muhammad is her mentioning of a wine-colored suit that was purchased for Master Fard Muhammad by the believers after Fard came out of jail, and how he suddenly stopped wearing it and passed it on to Elijah Muhammad, whose size was similar. In a follow-up story about the sensational sacrificial murder of James J. Smith, who was a former member of the Moorish Science Temple of America, the Detroit Free Press delved deeper and deeper into the origins of the Allah Temple of Islam and its founder, Master Fard Muhammad. Two homicide detectives named Oscar Berry and Charles Snyder began to uncover enough information about the practices of the religion taught by Fard Muhammad and his right-hand man, Yugan Ali. Robert Harris was mistakenly labeled an important member of the temple, but was only in fact a dues-paying member of low rank and had no standing in its leadership. The title King of Islam is a title that he gave to himself. Harris's behavior while he was in police custody clearly demonstrated the actions of a man insane. While in his jail cell, he would refuse to eat and pointed out the dangers of eating pork. And his enormous strength took many policemen to physically control him. Fard, while in police custody, was questioned left and right about his brand of the practices of Islam, trying his best to evade any questions that might land him in jail. The detectives were stunned when he told them with a smile on his face that he was God on earth in human form. These words, coming from a man quite diminutive in size, truly caused their eyebrows to rise. And to think that American Negroes actually believed that a person who was not only physically challenged in height, but was also of a different race than their own, who they worship as God, truly convinced the white detectives just how messed up black people's heads truly were. In the end, it was all about who would continue to control the minds of black people, white America or a man from Pakistan calling himself God. Fard had to go. Many memorable events appeared in various newspapers that informed readers worldwide to keep them abreast of the latest happenings. The arrest of Wali Fard in connection to his influence over one of his followers named Robert Kareem, who committed a ghastly ritualistic murder, shook up anyone who read the details of the sickening crime. The Detroit Free Press photographers captured a photograph of Master Fard Muhammad seated with two homicide detectives, Oscar Berry and Charles Snyder, in November of 1932. But it certainly wasn't the first time that Wali Fard received unwanted notoriety in a newspaper. Back in February 17, 1926, an article from a Spanish-language newspaper called Heraldo de Mexico was an article published in Los Angeles, California on February 17, 1926 on page 8 that read, headline, $5,000 in opiates are confiscated. Wali Fard, proprietor of the restaurant at 3rd and Flower and known sidewalk politician, was who possessed drugs. After 30 days of patient waiting, during which day and night closely watching the place, where it was known that there was a lot batch of opiates, various federal prohibition agents succeeded in finally bringing about the capture of a known sidewalk politician and proprietor of the restaurant located on Flower and 3rd. The aforementioned subject, who calls himself Wali Fard, had in his possession several ounces of cocaine and other opiates, which were valued at $5,000. The skilled detectives, whose victories this was, were Mr. Southard, Cox, and Bursthart, laid out an ingenious plan for the aforementioned Fard to fall into a trap. To do it, the detectives, passing as morphine addicts, presented themselves to the restaurant proprietor and made known that they wanted to buy una cupita, the street term for morphine. Fard naively falls for the trap. Not even suspecting who the three individuals buying the morphine were, Ford agreed to sell a little quantity of drugs for $235. As planned, Detective Cox presented himself dressed in such a way to truly appear as a morphine addict. He paid the stipulated sum, traded, receiving from Ford the morphine, which served as the body of evidence. Naturally, Ford was arrested and led to jail, where he will hope to be taken to a jury. It is interesting to note that this newspaper article supports author Carl Evans' claim that Fard was probably the same man known as George Fard in San Francisco in 1921. It was said that Ford was a known sidewalk politician. Fard's wife, Hazel, explicitly denied that Ford had ever talked about radical political ideas. She was with Fard as late as 1920, yet by 1921, George Fard was a popular militant UNIA member openly proclaiming radical pro-Japanese ideas. One is inclined to think that Ford/Fard was indeed George Fard, one of the many aliases of Master Fard Muhammad. Strange religious teachings that would lead to the arrest of Master Fard, whose teachings encouraged murder by a Nation of Islam member named Robert Harris, who would be declared completely insane and placed in a mental institution until his death. A murder Harris committed for his two gods of Islam, Fard, who by his own admission declared his race white to some and black to others. Fard, who would state to arresting officers that he was a false prophet, ripping off blacks strictly for money. Fard, who supposedly vanished, would be replaced by a former alcoholic named Elijah Poole, who would rise up to become one of the most feared black leaders ever. His name would become Elijah Muhammad. Muhammad, who would call himself God's last messenger, would attract many converts who would become very famous. Unfortunately, a history of division would repeat itself, resulting in more death.
Malcolm X is an extraordinary figure for whom African Americans have this deep affinity.
Malcolm X is one of the most historic and most significant human beings in American history.
Malcolm Little was born May 19, 1925 in Omaha, Nebraska. His father, Earl Little, was an outspoken Baptist minister and supporter of Marcus Garvey's Back to Africa movement. His push for civil rights made him the target of death threats, forcing the family to move several times. In 1929, their home in Michigan was burned to the ground, and 2 years later, Earl was found dead. This was a devastating blow for Malcolm's mother, who was eventually committed to a mental institution. Her 8 children were sent to orphanages and foster homes. In school, Malcolm was a smart and focused student until he told his teacher in high school he wanted to become a lawyer.
He wanted to be a lawyer, but they told him that they said niggers don't get to be lawyers, so that's an unreasonable goal for a nigger. And so, to some extent, America created Malcolm X. So those are the forces that made him into the person that he eventually became.
He dropped out and moved to Boston. Over the next few years, he held various jobs and moved from Boston to Flint, Michigan, to Harlem and New York, and finally back to Boston. During this period, he started his street career as a pimp, drug dealer, and gambler. In 1946, he was arrested for burglary and sent to prison. In prison, he began reading everything he could get a hold of. Inspired by his brother Reginald's conversion to Islam, Malcolm read the teachings of Elijah Muhammad and the Nation of Islam. Malcolm dropped his slave name Little and chose X to represent his lost tribal name. By the time he was paroled in 1952, he had committed himself to the Nation of Islam. He was a very charismatic and powerful speaker who conveyed Elijah Muhammad's teaching to the masses. He was appointed national spokesman. During this time, membership increased from 500 to 30,000.
Malcolm emerged as this extraordinarily talented itinerant minister, and he preached a creed of black superiority, that blacks controlled themselves.
In 1958, Malcolm X married Betty X in Lansing, Michigan. The couple had 6 daughters, including twins Malik and Malika, born in 1965 after their father's death and named for him. Malcolm X rejected the civil rights movement's use of nonviolent protest. Instead, he encouraged black men to use any means necessary to protect themselves.
That Malcolm's clarion call for blacks to mobilize and fight against racism inspired millions of African Americans, even those who disagreed with him. They respected him as a person, as a man.
In the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful, to whom all praise is due, whom we forever thank for giving us the Honorable Elijah Muhammad as our leader, teacher, and guide. And I specifically, ladies and gentlemen, and brothers and sisters, open up like that because I am a representative of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And were it not for him, you and I wouldn't be here today. In order for you and me to devise some kind of method or strategy to offset some of the events or repetition of the events that have taken place here in Los Angeles recently, we have to go to the root. We have to go to the cause. Dealing with the condition itself is not enough. We have to get to the cause of it all, or the root of it all. And it is because of our effort toward getting straight to the root that people oftentimes think we are dealing in hate. But first, I would like to congratulate and give praise to the Negro, so-called Negro leaders and so-called Negro organizations. And excuse me if I say so-called, it's hard for me to just outright say Negro when I know what that word Negro really means. The person whom you have come to know as Ronald Stokes, we know him as Brother Ronald, one of the most religious persons who displayed the highest form of morals of any black person anywhere on this earth. And as one of the previous speakers pointed out who knew him, everyone who knew him had to give him credit for being a good man, a clean man, an intelligent man, and an innocent man when he was murdered. The Negro, so-called Negro organizations and leaders should be given great credit for their failure or refusal to let the white man divide them and use them one against the other during this crisis. As Reverend Wilfred Wilson pointed out, I think it was 8 years ago today that the Supreme Court handed down the desegregation decision. And despite the fact that 8 years have gone past, that decision hasn't been implemented yet. I don't have that much faith. I don't have that much confidence. I don't have that much patience. And I don't have that much ignorance to... If the Supreme Court, which is the highest law-making body in the country, can pass a decision that can't get even 8% compliance with in 8 years because it's for black people, then my patience has run out. When black people who are being oppressed become impatient, they say that's emotional. Please. When black people who are being deprived of their citizenship, not only of their civil rights, but their human rights, become impatient, become fed up, don't want to wait any longer, then they say that's emotional. The Negro, so-called Negro leaders and organizations should be praised. They should be congratulated. They should be complimented. Because out of all of them combined, the white man has not yet found one who will play the role of Uncle Tom. But yet he has found no Tom, no puppet, no parrot who is still dumb enough in 1962 to represent the injustices that he's afflicting against our people. We don't care what your religion is. We don't care what organization you belong to. We don't care how far in school you went or didn't go. We don't care what kind of job you have. We have to give you credit for shocking the white man by not letting him divide you and use you one against the other. In the past, the greatest weapon the white man has had has been his ability to divide and conquer. As Jackie Robinson pointed out beautifully on the television last night, 4/5 of the world isn't white. Isn't that what Jackie said? And if 4/5 of the world is dark, how is it possible for 1/5 to rule, oppress, exploit, dominate, and brutalize the 4/5 who are in the majority? How do they do it? Divide and conquer. If I take my hand and slap you, you don't even feel it. It might sting you because these digits are separated. But all I have to do to put you back in your place is bring those digits together. This is what the white man has done to you and me. He has divided us and used us one against the other. But today, thanks to Allah, you can say thanks to God or thanks to Jesus or thanks to Jehovah, whatever you want. But as a follower of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, we have been taught to say thanks to Allah. And that's what Jesus said. Jesus called on Allah. He said, Allah, Allah, lama asabachthani. I believe what's good for Jesus is good for you. If Allah was good enough for Jesus to call upon, I think he should be good enough for you to call upon. Since the so-called Negro community has shocked the white man by resisting all efforts to divide us, I think that you and I should continue to shock him by staying and working together in unity. Despite religious, political, economic, or educational or social differences, let us remember that we are not brutalized because we're Baptists. We're not brutalized because we're Methodists. We're not brutalized because we're Muslims. We're not brutalized because we're Catholics. We're brutalized because we are black people in America. I have to say this, and I'll sit down. Back during slavery, when black people like me talked to the slaves, they didn't kill him. They sent some old house Negro along behind him to undo what he said. You have to read the history of slavery to understand this. There were two kinds of Negroes. There was that old house Negro and the field Negro. And the house Negro always looked out for his master. When the field Negroes got too much out of line, he held them back in check. He put them back on the plantation. The house Negro could afford to do that because he lived better than the field Negro. He ate better, he dressed better, and he lived in a better house. He lived right up next to his master in the attic or the basement. He ate the same food his master ate and wore his same clothes. And he could talk just like his master. Good diction. And he loved his master more than his master loved himself. That's why he didn't want his master hurt. If the master got sick, he'd say, "What's the matter, boss? We sick?" He would have been sick as the master. When the master's house caught a fire, he'd try and put the fire out. He didn't want his master's house burned. He never wanted his master's property threatened. And he was more defensive of it than the master was. That was the house Negro. But then you had some field Negroes who lived in huts, had nothing to lose. They wore the worst kind of clothes. They ate the worst food. And they caught hell. They felt the sting of the lash. They hated their master. Oh, yes, they did. If the master got sick, they prayed that the master died. If the master's house caught a fire, they prayed for a strong wind to come along. This was the difference between the two. And today you still have house Negroes and field Negroes.
The assassination of President John Fitzgerald Kennedy was unexpectedly captured on film with a 8mm Bell & Howell handheld motion picture camera in Dealey Plaza on November 22, 1963 in Dallas, Texas. The footage captured was by a man named Abraham Zapruder. The imagery captured shows what happened to President Kennedy, but does not show his assassins.
And when I say Kennedy, I mean John F. Kennedy. The man who promised all the American so-called Negroes who vote what he was going to do for them when he got in office, and has yet to do the first thing that he promised, but has paid off the Negro leadership so that they are silent and say nothing about the promises that he originally made to get Negroes to vote for him. Now, I would like to point out another point before we go any farther. We who are followers of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad do not make a choice between integration and segregation. Segregation doesn't enter into the picture at all. We are for separation, not segregation. Segregation, as we're taught by the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, is that which is forced upon inferiors by superiors. Separation is done voluntarily by two equals. When you find an all-white school, they don't call it a segregated school, they call it a separate school. When you find an all-Negro school, they call it a segregated school, because it was set up by the white man. If it was an all-black school that had been set up by the black man himself, run by the black man himself, with the curricula that they follow, put in the school by the black man himself, they would call it a separate school. And it would be just as independent and on equal basis with the white school. President who himself was discriminated against for a long time and accused Protestants of practicing religious discrimination, I think that he is way out of line to use his position now as the first Catholic president to open up his mouth against a religious group here in this country that is headed by the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. If he's not going to open up his mouth and outright condemn the Citizens Council by name, and condemn the Ku Klux Klan by name, and condemn the white Masonic order, which is all white, by name, and the white churches in the South by name, then Kennedy is wrong to point at the Muslims because we are black and because we don't want to mix with the people down there. And I should say that when we express our desire not to mix with whites, they call us a hate group. And Martin Luther King is running around here telling Negroes to love all kind of white people, and they sick dogs on Martin Luther King. So it answers itself, and it shows the hypocrisy of the white man.
On November 22nd, 1963, President John F. Kennedy was assassinated. for the nation. The day after the assassination, Malcolm X made a remark that shocked both his followers and his enemies.
When you send your chickens out in the morning from your barnyard, those chickens will return that evening to your barnyard, not your neighbor's barnyard. I think this is a prime example of the devil's chickens coming back home to roost.
The public was enraged by his apparent irreverence. In his book, Malcolm insists he was misunderstood.
You were involved in a controversy some months ago with your leader. Is that over?
Well, I've been silent for the past 90 days because of some statements I made concerning the President of the United States, which were distorted.
They were distorted?
And yes.
What did you say, Malcolm?
Well, I said the same thing that everybody says, that his assassination was the result of the climate of hate. But only I said the chickens came home to roost, and which means the same thing. Climate of hate means that this is the result of something. And when I said chickens coming home to roost, I said the same thing.
But you did not say that you were glad the president was killed.
No, that's what the press said.
You see, Malcolm had figured long ago, like Claude McKay, if we must die, let it not be like hogs, hunted and penned in an inglorious spot, while round us bark the mad and hungry dogs, making their mock at our accursed lot. If we must die, oh, let us nobly die. When Malcolm met Abdul Rahman Muhammad Babu, the revolutionary nationalist from Zanzibar, East Africa, in July of 1964, they became comrades. Babu knew that the white power structure was a worldwide villain, so to help Malcolm out in his quest for freedom, Babu told Malcolm that if black people in the United States would jumpstart a revolution, he would definitely supply Malcolm with crates of small arms to help in guerrilla warfare. Yeah, Abdul Rahman Babu would supply the small arms, but Malcolm would have to supply the army. You talk about a general without soldiers? When Malcolm told his inner staff members about lighting a fire under the oppressor's ass, most of them openly opposed him. Many claimed they wanted to put an end to racism, but when the hour of reckoning came into reality, all Malcolm heard was one lame excuse after another.
Hey, brother, I can't be out in the street ducking bullets.
I think we should keep marching and demonstrating. I still owe payments on my car.
Hey, Malcolm,
I might shoot my wife.
Malcolm, you can count
I ain't ready to get out in the street like that, man. I got a bad
join this organization.
I mean, I'm
my head
for
blown
some
off.
changes.
Fighting in the street.
But like I said, man, not on that tip.
I
can't participate in guerrilla warfare.
White people got too many guns.
Eyesight.
I mean, like it's easy for this African guy to give you some guns.
Are you serious, man?
But why ain't he supplying us a note to pay, man? Those guns could be hot.
No, I want to build a house.
Things ain't
I'm about to retire in 3 years. I could lose my pension.
Shucks, man.
No, man, it's not worth it.
I might shoot my wife. I don't think I'll be a good shooter.
Armed confrontation with white people.
Just use karate, Malcolm. Sure, brother Malcolm. I'm down with the movement. But in this case, the best movement is a bowel movement. Malcolm tried his best to conceal his disappointment with them. But when he shifted his torso from a direct frontal position to a slightly awkward 45-degree angle away from them, anyone who knew Malcolm's body language knew that disappointment was only an additional word to describe the loneliness he was feeling. And when Malcolm started rearranging his office supplies on his desk, it was a sure signal that he wanted to terminate the proceedings like all authoritarians do when they want a meeting to conclude. Who really understood the precarious position black folks were in, other than Malcolm? Meanwhile, black men, women, and children are being beaten into submission and murdered in the streets all across the 51 states of America and abroad, while everyone on the planet watches at home on their television sets, all afraid to step forward and speak out. Elijah Muhammad continues to tell black America to be patient. His God named Master Fard is trying to work himself up into anger so that he can throw a devastating punch to evil white America. Be cool, black America. God is feigning defeat. He's on the ropes, doing the rope-a-dope, and the enemy is soon going to punch himself out. Fruit of Islam, just keep posturing, keep posing, keep looking stern and militant. Keep it up. We'll scare them. They'll leave us alone. Keep on prancing. Do the rope-a-dope, Farad. Yeah, we're gonna knock white America out. Malcolm's out of his mind talking that revolution talk. Yeah, we're gonna do it our way. We're gonna let God get him. Yeah, we're gonna put an end to police brutality. Yeah, racism, discrimination, bad housing, bad food, no jobs. God gonna stop all this. They just split your mother's head open. Write that down. God gonna take care of it. A Klansman just hung your grandpappy. Write that down, brother. Farrakhan gonna stop all this shit in midair. A cop just shot your son in the back. You can't get a gig at Macy's and Bamberger's. Corvettes won't hire you. God's on the ropes, brother. Don't worry about it. He's doing the rope-a-dope. Yeah, God looks like he's finished. Don't worry. He's getting ready to hit him with every punch in the book.
But heavyweight white America wasn't at all intimidated by this little lightweight man from India throwing a phantom punch. They were more concerned with men who actually demonstrated their ability to wage war. Close friends Che Guevara and Abdul Babu weren't into virtual fighting. They both were the real deal. Guerrilla warfare wasn't a far-fetched idea. All black men had to do was overcome their fear of white men. Pick up the gun just as they do and liberate themselves. It was to be or not to be. Malcolm wasn't naive. He read the Holy Quran and knew what it said of those who would seek cover when fighting was prescribed for them.
To keep his ministers and staff under his control, Elijah Muhammad would stuff everyone's pockets with cash to keep everyone loyal to him. This was the same money being supplied by white billionaire H.L. Hunt. Now Elijah had people with him that would do anything to keep that cash coming their way. Everyone now had a vested interest in eliminating anyone messing with their money. For many, this handout was the only source of income that they had ever had. H.L. Hunt isn't such a bad blue-eyed devil after all, Elijah had to conclude. Malcolm had learned the hard way that everyone who joined the Nation of Islam didn't come to learn the ABCs of life or get their highly coveted and sought-after X. Many came for those other letters of the alphabet like M-O-N-E-Y, many whose behavior reminded you of other letters like CIA and FBI, who played their black unity roles to a T and was sent to SPY. Infiltrators who, instead of uniting for the long run, took to everyone's veins, razor-sharp shortcuts Kevorkian administered like self-inflicted wounds that brought about their own demise and still can't see that we were DOA. Malcolm had realized he was standing in a big puddle of shit and didn't have the shoes or shovel for it, and had gotten mixed up with a bunch of greedy, materialistic, clean-cut, but still niggas, rather than preferred selfless raggedy revolutionaries. And in the end, all those assalamu alaikums, bean pies, and brotherhood talk was pure bullshit. Money was the motive for many Muslims. H.L. Hunt knew the psychological makeup of black folks. That's why he started funding them. He knew that if you dance to the music, you've got to pay to the piper. Back at the house, Malcolm's head was spinning. The more he thought about all the unsuspecting brothers and sisters that he convinced to join the Nation of Islam, his head spun even more. When Malcolm joined the Nation of Islam in 1948, the organization barely had 400 members. When Malcolm became a minister around 1952, the nation's membership really started growing. By 1953, membership doubled. Malcolm was such a dynamic, attractive, and gifted orator, he could have read the telephone directory to standing room only. Now, uppermost in Malcolm's mind, he wanted to alert all the brothers and sisters that they were being manipulated by an organization he felt had no intentions of seriously taking on the power structure. Malcolm pulled back the curtain. He discovered that Elijah Muhammad wasn't the divine man that he had projected himself to be. Elijah's claims of divine power were never actually demonstrated nor challenged by his followers. Criticism of the great and powerful Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, the messenger of God, was strictly forbidden. Malcolm had dared to question Elijah's teachings. Teachings that were surfacing as pure humbug. Earl Grant and Malcolm were very close. Grant was a former Nation of Islam member who resigned from the organization in 1961 because they simply had nothing for him to do. Grant's technical skills superseded selling newspapers. Both men became reacquainted when the organization suspended Malcolm for 90 days for some remarks Malcolm made about President Kennedy's assassination. During the suspension, Grant phoned Malcolm, and Malcolm was happy to hear from Grant. When the Nation of Islam refused to lift Malcolm's 90-day suspension, Malcolm decided to form up a human rights organization designed for some real action other than just selling newspapers. Malcolm didn't have to ask Grant if he wanted to join. Earl Grant came running. It was an offer Earl couldn't refuse. Finally, black folks had an organization whose leader couldn't be bribed, was no sellout, couldn't be compromised. Finally, a leader who was in it for real. A leader who wasn't being funded by someone outside of the community to mince words on freedom, justice, and equality. A leader who was an original thinker whose objective was to expose the power structure for its centuries-old mistreatment of his people by taking the international Western power structure into the world court, charging it with violation of Afro-Americans' human rights. This was unprecedented in the history of the black struggle. Malcolm's organization was growing like a snowball rolling down a snow-covered hill. Other elements, determined to see that it failed, also joined the ranks.
Malcolm's faith was challenged when he found out that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad had seduced several women in the Nation of Islam, and some had bore his children. In 1964, Malcolm X renounced Elijah Muhammad and left the Nation of Islam. He founded a religious organization, the Muslim Mosque Incorporated, and took a pilgrimage to the Holy Land of Mecca, Saudi Arabia. In Mecca, he met people of all races he could call his brothers. He renamed himself El-Hajj Malik El-Shabazz and returned to the U.S. with new hope for the future.
After being ousted out of Elijah Muhammad's Nation of Islam, Malcolm formed two of his own organizations, the Muslim Mosque Incorporated and the OAAU, an acronym for the Organization of Afro-American Unity.
Do you feel that your message, apparent message of love that you brought back from Islam is the real reason they're after you, because you're not hating as hard as they want you to?
Well, I never did hate anybody hard. But I do know that when I wrote that letter saying that there were white people in Mecca, it shook up a lot of Muslims, because most of the Muslims who follow Mr. Muhammad absolutely believed that it was impossible, physically impossible, I should say divinely impossible, for a white person to go to Mecca. And my trip there shattered that image, or that misconcept.
Anyone call you directly, Malcolm?
I've been receiving calls ever since I left the Black Muslim movement.
And what sort of calls? Malcolm, you're disenchanted in view of the fact that these men who were your brothers are making threats against your life?
No, because actually it's not their fault. Most of them, now Joseph and the officials, they have a knowledge of what it's all about. But the rank and file Muslim brother does not know what it's all about. They are, out of religious sincerity, they think that they are doing the will of Allah by protecting a man who I myself taught them was divine. So I don't in any way fault them. But those who are over them and give the orders, and actually the ultimate order comes from Elijah Muhammad himself. As long as I represented the Black Muslim movement as an example of morality, unity, and militancy, as long as I could do that, I represented it. It was when I realized that it could not be represented as that I came on and started working among the non-Muslim Negroes, as I announced in January. And I had no intention, or rather March, and I had no intention of ever even speaking on this. Had they left me alone, you still wouldn't know what really took place.
Why are they threatening your life?
Well, primarily because they're afraid that I will tell the real reason that that I'm out of the black Muslim movement, which I never told. I kept to myself. But the real reason is that Elijah Muhammad, the head of the movement, is the father of 8 children by 6 different teenage girls, 6 different teenage girls who were his private personal secretary. The one who first made me aware of this was Wallace Muhammad, Mr. Muhammad's son. And I had stated in a newspaper article about an effort to take my life back in January, and at that time the Muslims denied it. In fact, they tried to make it appear to my brother that I was insane. But on a program in Chicago called Hotline, that's moderated by Wesley South, John Ali, the national secretary, admitted, I think it was Wednesday or Thursday, one of these days last week, that they absolutely were going to kill me.
What steps will you take to protect yourself from this threat?
I take no steps. I have a rifle. If anybody comes to my house without a good reason, I intend to try and use it, and that's all.
Right now?
No, I don't worry. I tell you, I'm a man who believed that I died 20 years ago, and I live like a man who is dead already. I have no fear whatsoever of anybody or anything.
Malcolm was seen as a threat to the Nation of Islam, and he was informed that members were plotting to assassinate him. His home was firebombed, but he and his family were unharmed.
Take this guy as an example. Don't let his friendly smile fool you. In 1965, John Peters was an FOI captain who was running around town trying to find a silencer for his illegally owned pistol that he wanted to attach to his Roscoe to take some shots at Malcolm. One can smile and smile again and still be a villain. John Peters, when he flashed his teeth, fooled many people. This guy wanted Malcolm so bad, he couldn't think straight. He wanted to be like Bond, James Bond. He wanted to use an exotic silencer on his pistol so that he could be applauded as a hero and good guy in the Nation of Islam. He wanted to have a rep as the captain who took out Malcolm with his silencer. He wanted to get upped. He wanted to be known as a made man, not to be messed with. He wanted to be known as the guy who could drop you and nobody wouldn't even hear it because he used his silencer.
This is Leon Amir, who was Cassius Clay's secretary, whom they beat unmercifully up in Boston. And it was he who heard Elijah Muhammad Jr. come to New York when Elijah Muhammad was at the Armory in June of last year. Jr. stood up and told the fruit, many of whom are here now also, that I should have been killed, that my tongue should have been put in an envelope and sent back to Chicago by now. And then Clarence, the captain from Boston, and John, the captain from Springfield, came to New York to assassinate me and came to him to get us silenced.
Yeah, but history would prove that it was his dumb ass that needed to be silenced. This clown betrayed the Black Revolution.
Personally ordered attacks upon you?
Oh yes, this brother was a captain. He was one of the karate experts who taught karate on the entire East Coast, Eastern region. And he was in the inner circle. And he pointed out that in October, he didn't cease being a captain, but his influence or authority was placed beneath that of Clarence, the captain who's in Boston. Clarence was put over Joseph, and shortly after that, as Leon Amir testified, Clarence, the captain from Boston, and John, the captain from Springfield, Massachusetts, came to New York to carry out this so-called assassination. And they came to Leon looking for a silencer for their gun. Well, see, I understand all of it, but they parked half a block from my house here in the home of Alvin, who's also one of Elijah Muhammad's men, looking for a chance when they could, make their move. But thanks to Allah, they didn't get a chance.
Al Van X was a gifted piano player who played on the popular hit song, A White Man's Heaven is a Black Man's Hell, sung by Louis X, who also played violin, Al Van X on piano, C. Civil on guitar, M. Assaroon on bongo, W. Brewster on bongo and conga, and K. Husband on bass. The extended play two-sided 45 RPM record was released in 1960, and it was beautifully performed by all the artists. It is now a collector's item. Al Van X was the brother of Louis X, now known as Louis Farrakhan.
We were living in luxury, enjoying freedom, justice, and equality. We wore silken robes and slippers of gold. We were the wealthiest and the wisest people, I'm told. Now we are the poorest of the poor. Nobody wants us at their door.
All right, brothers and sisters, this behind me is the home of Malcolm X. Minister Louis Farrakhan's brother Alvin Farrakhan stayed right there. Turn that camera around. Where you're looking at Danny's grocery store, right above, he stayed in apartment 2B. That's Alvin Farrakhan. Again, the proximity. Just for your information.
His followers are violent against Negroes.
Against Negroes?
Yes, his followers will go out and attack another Negro, like they will attack me, or they will brutalize a fellow Muslim who breaks the law. But you don't find those same followers going out and becoming involved in the Negro struggle in any way whatsoever.
Elijah Muhammad's son, Elijah Muhammad Jr., was considered in the Nation of Islam as the mouthpiece of his father. It was a given that if Elijah Jr. said anything, it could be taken as gospel that it came from the old man. This is why it sent chills down the spine of Nation of Islam member Leon 4X Amir when he heard Elijah Jr. speak at a private meeting of Fruit of Islam members on June 28, 1964, demanding that Malcolm X's house be knocked to the ground and that Malcolm's tongue be cut out. Elijah Muhammad Jr. was beating the war drums. Elijah Muhammad Jr. made it plain that his father wanted Malcolm X dead.
His followers are violent against Negroes.
Against Negroes?
Yes, his followers will go out and attack another Negro, like they will attack me.
From his office at the Hotel Teresa on June 2nd, 1964, Malcolm composed a short but powerful letter that broke down just how cowardly Elijah Muhammad was in the face of the enemy. Hotel Teresa, New York City, June 2, 1964. Assalamu alaikum. In the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful. Mr. Elijah Muhammad, despite the increasing acts of violence against fellow Afro-Americans instigated by the Fruit of Islam recently in Boston, New York, and Philadelphia, you have tried to give the public the impression that you are aloof to what is going on. But as the leader of the Fruit of Islam, your calculated silence will not enable you to escape the full blame for the explosive situation that is developing. Students of the Black Muslim movement know that no member of the Fruit of Islam will ever initiate an act of violence unless the order is first given by you. Since you didn't open your mouth and give word to fight back when your faithful Muslim followers were brutally shot and beaten by white racists in Los Angeles, California, Rochester, New York, Monroe, Louisiana, and elsewhere, how can you justify now giving the word for your followers to declare war on each other simply because some refuse to follow you any longer? No matter how much you stay in the background and stir others up to do your murderous dirty work, any bloodshed committed by Muslim against Muslim will compel the writers of history to declare you guilty not only of adultery and deceit, but also of murder. Assalamu alaikum. Malcolm X. That letter was so damn truthful and hot, they could have roasted some chestnuts over it. But instead of them having an epiphany and saying to themselves, you know, Brother Malcolm is right. We lured the man into the organization believing we were for real. We need to leave the man alone. We ought to be ashamed of ourselves. But that wasn't going to happen. Not when goo gobs of money was coming in from H.L. Hunt.
This statement is from Messenger Elijah Muhammad, the leader of the Muslims in America. Minister Malcolm Shabazz, addressing a public meeting at Manhattan Center in New York City on Sunday, December 1st, did not speak for the Muslims when he made comments on the death of the President, John F. Kennedy. He was speaking for himself and not Muslims in general. And Minister Malcolm has been suspended from public speaking for the time being. Mr. Muhammad's correct statement on hearing of the death of the President was as follows. We with the world are very shocked at the assassination of our President, and the nation still mourn the loss of our President. And he has said that it seems that every president who speaks out on behalf of the Negro has been assassinated, from Lincoln to President Kennedy.
In January of 1965, Malcolm told two of his top aides that he had to make an important trip to Los Angeles. He had to get some important information from two of the girls that Elijah had knocked up. Using the fictitious name of David in an attempt to keep a low profile, Malcolm boarded a plane from New York and flew to Los Angeles. Malcolm's cousin, Hakeem A. Jamal, who wrote the book From a Dead Level, Malcolm X and Me, was waiting inside the airport terminal with an old friend of Malcolm named Edward Bradley. While Jamal and Bradley were waiting for Malcolm to arrive, they noticed a well-dressed black man sitting in the lounge, who Jamal thought he saw somewhere before. Jamal said to Bradley, "Wow, that guy looks like a black Muslim." Jamal couldn't stop staring at this well-dressed black man he thought was a black Muslim. But when the man got up and walked over to a cigarette machine and purchased a pack of menthol cigarettes and lit one up, Jamal dismissed the whole thought. Jamal's dismissal didn't last long, because in less than a nanosecond, his eyes were back on the well-dressed man toting on that stogie. Jamal's eyes followed the man like an eagle protecting its nest. It was the cigarette that the man kept puffing on that was challenging his initial thought. Muslims don't smoke, so how in the world could this man be a black Muslim? And then suddenly, Jamal realized that he indeed was correct. The well-dressed stranger that he couldn't make his mind up about was the National Secretary of the Nation of Islam, John Ali. And then, as if they came out of the woodwork, several black Muslims suddenly appeared, and the airport was crawling with them. It was obvious they were not there to hug and kiss Malcolm. They were there to kill him. Either someone in Malcolm's camp betrayed him, or law enforcement alerted the black Muslims about Malcolm's trip to Los Angeles. Realizing the immediate danger Malcolm was in, and that his plane would arrive at any minute, Jamal quickly alerted airport security, and the plane that Malcolm was on was diverted to a different terminal. Malcolm describes the incident in his own words.
The black Muslim movement tried to kill me in Los Angeles airport while I was in the company of the Los Angeles police. The Los Angeles police stopped the TWA Airlines from taking off. They slipped me into a private room onto the plane through the basement. because of the presence of these persons in the airport who were completely heedless of the presence of the police. Now, this airliner was held up an hour and a half. Every passenger aboard it was taken off. His luggage was searched. I was kept on the plane. My luggage was searched. And then the TW Airlines security agent flew to Chicago from Los Angeles with me. I was met at the airport in Chicago by the Assistant Attorney General of the state of Illinois and at least 20 different detectives. I was held in their custody for 24 hours. I appeared on the Cupsonet show. When I came out of the studio, officials of the Black Muslim movement in Chicago even tried to attack the police to get at me. Police department from coast to coast in this country have the Black Muslim movement well infiltrated, just as they have any other group well infiltrated. They are well aware of these plots and discussions that take place.
Malcolm couldn't have had a worse enemy against him more than John Ali. This was a cold-blooded nigga who would brave the very fires of hell to get what he wanted. This was the one man Elijah was scared of. Ali's fixed, unemotional, and uninteresting-looking face did, however, emote his soulless spirit and cunning gaze, supported by his lowered shoulders, reminiscent of a rat poised to strike. When his weekly paycheck given to him by Elijah Muhammad was threatened, Malcolm didn't stand a chance. It's a government-controlled organization. They've been allowed to commit murder. It's been rehearsed several times. The usual seating arrangement in the ballroom will suddenly be changed. They can boldly announce in their newspaper that Malcolm shall not escape. The die is set. They all have foreknowledge of what's going to take place on February 21st, 1965. It's a wrap. It's a done deal. He shall not escape. His fate is sealed. He'll be blasted away. They have assistance, permission from the white government to execute him. It's going to be like shooting fish in a barrel. All they have to do now is show up and take their key positions. He's been betrayed from all angles, from the inside out. They can't see how they are hurting generations yet to come. They are blind. They think they are accomplishing something. Their judgment was bad in 1965. Their judgment's still bad in 2013. And time has not healed all wounds. The Audubon Ballroom, located in Spanish Harlem at 3940 Broadway between 165th and 166th Streets, is where freedom fighter Malcolm X is holding meetings, attempting to galvanize black people into responding to ongoing racism. The response from racist police patrolling the area talk among themselves, their desire, if it could be possible, to blow up the entire goddamn black neighborhood, let alone the ballroom itself, even if it's crowded with women, children, and elders. As far as they are concerned, blacks don't deserve a damn thing, and they should wait until white society feels fit to grant them anything, if at all. Still, Malcolm was determined to get black people a fair share in this world by any means necessary. To pull off the murder of Malcolm X successfully, the Nation of Islam had to first come up with an ingenious plan to get into the ballroom. The Ticketron pay-per-view affairs given by Mosque No. 7 were front-row assassination rehearsals that would start right inside the ballroom that the Nation of Islam would rent out. The plan that they came up with was based on the mythical Trojan horse legend. The Nation of Islam would double up on the myth and put a twisted spin on it that would gain them entry into the Audubon Ballroom, where a lieutenant named Linwood X would distract Malcolm's followers. All that was needed now was a guarantee that everyone would be in their proper places. Lieutenant Linwood X handpicks his team of men that will take care of Malcolm X. William Bradley, Talmadge Hayer, Albert Benjamin Thomas, John Kinley, also known as Wilbur McKinley, Leon Davis, and Clarence Gill. They're ready. They've rehearsed it for months. And now it's time to take out their target.
William Bradley will be the lead shooter who will fire the first blast from his sawed-off shotgun. Lieutenant Linwood X could always rely on Bradley when serious enforcement had to be carried out. If Bradley was successful in this most important mission, he'd be set for life. Being deprived night after night from getting a good night's rest and trying to stay alert from non-stop death threats and physical attacks, Malcolm is forced to start dangerously dabbling with over-the-counter sleeping aids.
So don't spend another sleepless night counting sheep. Take Salmonex as directed for 100% safe sleep. No prescription needed. Money back if not satisfied. Get Salmonex at your drugstore now.
But the over-the-counter sleeping aids did not put Malcolm in the deep sleep he really wanted. He would have to step it up and get a doctor to inject a more powerful sedative. What a price to pay fighting for 22 million Afro-Americans' freedom. When Malcolm's house was firebombed, Malcolm stated that he saw someone running in his house and that the pistol that he fired didn't go off. What if the pistol did fire and he hit a family member accidentally? Malcolm was so doped up the night of the house bombing, he couldn't see straight. In the book, Malcolm X, The Man and His Times, edited by John Henry Clark, in the chapter, The Last Days of Malcolm X, on page 85, Earl Grant writes this: Brother Malcolm began to describe the evening. He said he had been more tired than usual and had taken a sleeping pill so as to get some rest. Without being disrespectful, I completely lost my temper, and I asked him if he knew what he had done, that if he wanted to sleep that deeply, he could have called me first, and some of the brothers would have come out and stood guard around his house all night. He looked down at me with that big fatherly smile of his, and I just gave up and walked off mumbling to myself. Droggy from sedatives, Malcolm keeps his speaking engagement at the Ford Auditorium in Detroit on February 14, 1965. The bodyguard of Muhammad Ali, Clarence X. Gill, is appointed to take charge of the war against Malcolm X because of the lack of action to punish Malcolm by members of New York's Mosque No. 7. Clarence Gill is from the Boston Mosque. He is also a captain under Lewis X. Arriving at Mosque No. 25 in Newark, New Jersey on February 21, 1965 are the two Bostonians, Clarence X. Gill and Lewis X. They are both greeted by Lieutenant Linwood X. The assassination team decide that one of them will carry a special item hidden away in a body wrap with a zippered pocket in case there is a body search by Malcolm's security team. That special item is very important to the success or failure of the mission. Is it a single key to a locker if the weapons are stored in the Audubon in advance? Could it be airline tickets to a place out of the country? Talmadge Hayer would be chosen to wear the body wrap. Early before noon on February 21, 1965, Linwood X and his team of assassins would leave Mosque No. 25 in Newark, New Jersey, go over the George Washington Bridge, and head straight to the Audubon Ballroom. While driving, all they could talk about is how they were going to take Malcolm X off the planet. They let the car windows down while smoking some very powerful hashish that will help alter their state of mind and help prepare them for a most horrific act they were about to perform.
2 months before Malcolm's assassination, Lewis X wrote in Muhammad Speaks, "The die is set, and Malcolm shall not escape." especially after such evil, foolish talk about his benefactor, Elijah Muhammad, in trying to rob him of the divine glory which Allah had bestowed upon him. Such a man is worthy of death, and it would have been so were it not for Muhammad's confidence that God would give him the victory over the enemies. Aside from the horrible statement of Malcolm being worthy of death, it's also very chilling that Louis X's predictive words, "The die is set, and Malcolm shall not escape," clearly suggests that Louis X had foreknowledge of Malcolm's fate and knew of the rehearsals in the ballroom for Malcolm's murder long before the event took place.
He shall not escape. 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 Nearly all of Elijah Muhammad's officials will have key roles in Malcolm's murder. When Malcolm revealed publicly that Elijah Muhammad was faking to be divine and that his money wasn't coming from the sale of newspapers and bean pies, but from the world's richest white man who was in the oil industry named H.L. Hunt, the Nation of Islam was embarrassed. The mission to physically destroy Malcolm was now hastened. While brutal white human beings were turning powerful water hoses on black people trying to seek freedom, justice, and equality, and while German Shepherd police dogs were biting into the groins of black men and biting into the breast of black women, Elijah Muhammad never unleashed his Fruit of Islam men to fight back against the vicious attacks of hateful whites. All Elijah ever did was reach for the chicken switch whenever fighting was prescribed. The Fruit of Islam, who was supposed to be tough, did nothing in the face of brutal attacks from white people. Many of Elijah Muhammad's Fruit of Islam men were glad to be held back from engaging in war with white people. They were only let loose on their own. And right now, Malcolm X was their #1 target. When talk of Malcolm's irregular sleeping habits started to spread through the grapevine, a secret police agent named Gene Roberts, who gained Malcolm's trust, would report back to his superior named Tony Ulasewicz everything about Malcolm from A to Z. Something like knowing a person's sleeping habits or troubles may appear to be minor to most, but this was the type of thing that they could fully exploit, especially by an enemy. Gene Roberts fed the government enough information about Malcolm when calling in his daily reports. It was used to the maximum. Now the Nation of Islam members were even aware of Malcolm's inability to get a full night's rest. After the firebombing of Malcolm's home, a vote by Malcolm's inner staff members was made about whether or not Malcolm should be allowed to speak at the Audubon Ballroom's next gathering on February 21st, 1965. Incredibly, only one person objected about Malcolm speaking, but he was overruled by vote. The man who was against Malcolm speaking was a man named Les Edmonds. For maximum damage to the intended target, 00 buck, also called 00 buckshot, is used because of its large size and penetrating ability. The shot is so penetrating, it could easily go through the thick and tough hide of big game animals. After scouting the entire area, the assassin team enter the ballroom and wait for the green go signal. Malcolm arrives at the ballroom so doped up on sedatives, he looks like he aged 10 years overnight. The killers are now in the house. The die is set. Malcolm shall not escape. Gene Roberts, the secret police agent, tells political activist and admirer of Malcolm named Roland Shepard that he can't sit in the seat that he normally sits in. Shepard is a regular at the ballroom who's seen and heard Malcolm speak over 20 times. After the murder, Linwood X immediately calls Newark, New Jersey's Mosque number 25 and Mosque number 7 and informs that the man called Malcolm X will trouble them no more. We shut that red nigger down, boy. You're gonna have to wait to see it on film.
Ali, the National Secretary, admitted I think it was Wednesday or Thursday, one of these days last week, that they absolutely were going to kill me. That they absolutely were going to kill me. That they absolutely were going to kill me.
Okay, here's the deal. John Ali arrived in New York on February 19, 1965, and checked into the Americana Hotel. He meets with the shooters, and they go over their plans a few more times. After Malcolm is killed, Ali is supposed to immediately fly back to Chi-Town to solidify his airtight alibi concerning his whereabouts. It's important that Ali stands visibly alongside Elijah Muhammad during this press conference, slated for February 22, 1965. The press conference starts on the agreed time, but Ali is not present. John Ali missed his flight back to Chicago and had to take the next flight out to be at the press conference. Naturally, the press conference had to start without John Ali. Elijah Muhammad was accompanied by his son Herbert Muhammad and one of his top aides, Minister James Shabazz. These two men looked on nervously as the press reporters asked the head of the organization some serious questions about Malcolm's assassination. Elijah's son and the chief advisor carefully listened and hoped the old man wouldn't fuck up, because they knew that these news reporters could be very shrewd in getting someone to say something they had no intentions on saying and would later regret, or would have to embarrassingly backtrack live on camera. It was like, I hope his brain doesn't fail now. If the old man fucked it up, the whole crew could instantly go down. They knew they killed Malcolm, and they had other things on their minds, like car payments, child support, another trip to Switzerland, and that kind of shit. And they knew that those material comforts in life could all go up in smoke if the wrong words were spoken. Damn, where's John Ali? The old man will keep the story straight if he's here. The press conference was set for less than 12 minutes, but with these tough questions being asked, it seems like it's an hour. And so far, Elijah's doing well in answering the reporters' questions. John Ali's absence has not yet been a major factor. But no one's out the woods yet, and beads of cold sweat are starting to form on 3 foreheads. And it's not because of hot camera lights. And of course, the questions were anticipated. Mr. Muhammad, did the Muslims kill Malcolm? Nah, we don't get down like that. How could you ask me something like that? We don't carry guns. You must be new on the job. You should know better than that. Malcolm was killed by God. Farrakhan did it, not us. You know, that kind of shit. The gesture of keeping one's fingers crossed is commonly used to wish for good luck when faced with evil. The lengthy contortions of twisted fingers being performed by 2 men standing in back of Elijah Muhammad, invoking the power of whatever force human or otherwise, would have made Harry Houdini take notice. Crossed fingers are often used when telling lies or in order to invalidate promises. The onset of arthritic pain dictated that they'd soon have to break the cross. And then suddenly, John Ali appeared, nudging his way in between the two standing men. Cameras and flashing lights captured the moment and would also alert future historians to question John Ali's whereabouts before, during, and after Malcolm's assassination. 3 photographs taken in successive order gave credence to the expression, "A picture is worth 1,000 words," and here we're talking about 3. These photographs clearly demonstrate that John Ali's tardy arrival at the press conference supports a new theory. The CCTV camera is a closed-circuit television camera in which captured signals are not publicly distributed but are monitored primarily for surveillance, security purposes, or private viewing. CCTV relies on strategic placement of cameras and observation of the camera's input on monitors somewhere. These cameras gain the designation closed circuit to indicate that access to their content is limited by design only to those able to see it. CCTV cameras are typically the size of a silver dollar coin. It was widely rumored that on the day Malcolm was shot, that the entire assassination was filmed while it was happening.
Also captured on film was the attempted escape of Talmadge Hayer, who was nearly pulled apart by Malcolm's followers. This amazing footage also reveals the presence of William Bradley, who has a copy of Muhammad Speaks in his coat pocket. Bradley is the man who fired the shotgun at Malcolm. Bradley, knowing that Hayer was injured badly, has no choice but to go for the body wrap, Velcro tied to Hayer's waist. If Malcolm's followers retrieved the contents of the body wrap, the whole thing could implicate many people, including some of Malcolm's people who were in on the plot. This slowed down footage shows Bradley retrieving the body wrap off of Hayer's waist. The body wrap is highlighted with yellow and orange superimposed colors. Once again, in real time, unaltered. Seven of the 12 shotgun pellets from the first blast ripped into his heart, shredded his aorta, as crimson red-colored blood flowed like water from a broken faucet pipe, dripping and flooding into internal cavities, marinating and saturating body and soul. As he clutched his chest,
wondering what was the extent of his injuries. Breathing wasn't an option when both lungs were punctured like two newly purchased helium-filled balloons popped by something sharp by a mischievous prankster. Two balloons that seemed like you stood in a line a lifetime to get. Tubes and sacs connected to his bronchial tree erupted, clutching his chest, wondering what was the extent of his injuries. Shotgun pellets went through main organs and lodged in his spine that will soon have to be chiseled out with crude sharp instruments during his upcoming scheduled autopsy. Still standing, wondering again, to what extent was his injuries? Has heart ventricles contracted, pushing out more blood by the pints, with air gushing from flattening lungs like monsoon winds or a sudden unexpected blown out tire from a fast-moving vehicle. He couldn't meditate, contemplate, ventilate, oxygenate. And in a last act of defiance, even after being hit, he stood there, determined to prove that black folks didn't have a genetic predisposition to cowardice. And when he could no longer defy the law of physics, he went down in history to rise again, never to be forgotten. Didn't they know you can't keep a good man down?
Now we want more answers. We know for certain the leadership of the Nation of Islam planned Malcolm's murder. And we know for certain the names of many participants. What about the New York City Police Department? Where did they suddenly appear from after the shooting? Were they present to protect Malcolm or to protect the killers? Why was William Bradley so casual and not quick to run to the getaway car? Why don't we have photographs of all of Malcolm's named assassins? Why was Malcolm allowed to speak while being in such a worn-out, overworked state that he was in? Why didn't Malcolm's followers notice that the Nation of Islam were holding affairs right inside the Audubon Ballroom? Who had Malcolm's back? What was in that body wrap? Was it airline tickets? Keys? Bradley and Hayer, how about granting us an interview? We want to ask you both some real tough questions.
Muhammad Ali.
Whatever the punishment, whatever the persecution is for standing up for my religious beliefs, even if it means facing machine gun fire that day, I will face it before denouncing Elijah Muhammad and the religion of Islam. I'm ready to die.
It appears that Elijah Muhammad only chose select individuals who he revealed Master Farad's identity with. It's obvious that Muhammad Ali and his wife Khalila were two of that select few. While many people today claim to have specific knowledge about the man they say is God, the reality of it is that very few members in the Nation of Islam actually met Master Fard Muhammad. I arranged through talk show host El-Shabazz to do a over-the-phone interview with the still stunningly beautiful former wife of Muhammad Ali, Khalila Ali. I happened to come across a photograph that I saw her in that blew my mind. I asked Sister Khalila several questions about the amazing photograph that displayed her presenting a birthday cake to a man she disclosed to me to be Master Fard Muhammad.
Hold on. Brother Omar, you there?
Yes, I am.
Assalamu alaikum. You're on the phone with Sister Khalila Ali.
Oh, Sister Khalila, assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum assalam, Brother Omar. How are you?
Oh, I'm all right, sister. How are you?
I'm doing fine. Thanks a lot. I am.
Well, you I saw a recent picture of you, and you certainly look marvelous. You look great.
You might need glasses.
No, I got good vision.
Okay.
Hey, Sister Priscilla, this brother's working on a project that he's working on Master Fard Muhammad, and I was sharing with him the picture that you had shown me with Brother Abdullah, and I told him that you had said the messenger introduced you to him as Master Fard Muhammad, and the brother wanted to ask you some questions about that.
Sure.
If you don't mind.
I don't mind at all.
I'm trying to work on a very small project about, Farad and the nation.
Yes, sir.
It's something I'm doing strictly on my own, but that was a very interesting picture.
Very interesting, huh? Yeah.
Yeah. So I wrote down several questions. So whenever you want me to begin, you just let me know and I'll ask you.
Yeah, I've just been good right now.
Okay. All right, Sister Khalila, do you remember the actual date of that photograph? Because I see you're very young in that photograph.
Yeah, the date would be, I would be guessing, I was divorced from my at the time. So it was in my home. He stayed in my home.
All right. We'll move on. Maybe it'll come to you.
I was just thinking it would be like 77.
Okay.
I think maybe she was divorced 78, 70, so it had to be, it was in the 70s.
Okay, somewhere in the
late
70s.
70s, early 80s.
Now, in that picture, there's two women in back of you, in back of the man. And who is the man?
The man himself?
Yeah, the man that you are presenting.
His name is Muhammad Abdullah.
And now, who is he supposed to be?
Well, he's Muhammad Abdullah.
Is he Farad Muhammad formerly?
Well, I was introduced to him as that, but a lot of people don't believe it, but that's what I was introduced to him as. I can only go by what somebody tells me.
I understand.
And I only trusted one man, and that was Elijah Muhammad. So he said it, I believe it.
So Elijah Muhammad introduced you to this man?
Yes, sir.
And what was
I was introduced in his home with this man.
I'm sorry, I missed that. You were introduced in his home?
Yeah, I was introduced to him in Elijah Muhammad's home, not in my home.
Okay, so he was at Elijah Muhammad's home.
He was at his home.
And Elijah Muhammad said to you, "This is Master Farad Muhammad?"
That's what he said.
Now, what was your reaction when he told you that?
I was excited. I was elated, and I thought that was beautiful. But I wondered why his name was different when I saw him the second time. But I asked him why was it different. He said he changed it.
He changed it?
He said he used his name then in America when he came here. That's what he used. And his real name was Muhammad Abdullah.
What was your former husband Muhammad Ali with you at the time?
No.
Okay.
I was divorced from Ali then.
Oh, I see. Now,
before when I met him, I wasn't even married to Ali.
You met him.
I was younger when I first met him.
When you first met Master Farad.
He just looked older.
So you met Master Farad on two occasions. When you were younger and sometime later.
But he adopted me as his granddaughter, so it wasn't like I met him a couple of times. I mean, he lived in my home. I went to his home, with his wife and his family.
So those women in back of him in that photograph, who are those women?
My daughter, Miriam, and my adopted daughter, Christine Gunasekara from Malaysia.
You said your daughter Miriam is in that photograph with you presenting?
Yeah, my firstborn, yes. Me and Muhammad Ali's firstborn. She's standing right over Our grandfather.
Oh, I thought those were two women from India.
These are my daughters, man. They know the men from India. Those are my daughters.
So so one of the women is your daughter, Mariam.
And the other one is the one I adopted and brought back from Malaysia. She was visiting me in Malaysia.
See, I don't have the actual photograph in front of me right now.
There was only two women that were pictures in the paper.
Okay, now.
Photo.
Okay, what about the cake? What's the occasion for the cake?
It was his birthday.
It was his birthday.
I made a cake.
You made that cake?
I made the cake.
Let me ask you.
Carrot. It was a carrot cake.
It was carrot cake?
Yep.
I hear that. The traditional Muslim carrot cake.
That's right.
I hear you.
Yes, sir.
Did you ever hear him speak several languages?
He speaks about 7 languages.
Did you actually hear him speak any other languages?
Of course, my dear brother.
Is there any, do you have more pictures other than that one picture? Any other photographs that you might be able to?
No, not with me, no.
No, not with you. Where would they be, sister? The photographs.
Well, these the same pictures that was in my house. I didn't take a lot of pictures with him. I just never thought of taking a lot of pictures with him. I just took that one because it was his birthday. I don't have a whole lot of pictures. I don't even have a picture of me and Elijah Muhammad. I never thought to take any with him.
Now, what about?
I was too excited.
I understand. Now, what about? Did you speak to him on the phone several times, Farad?
No, because he adopted me as his granddaughter when he first met me. He said, "This is one I'm going to adopt as my granddaughter." And he writes letters to me, and he'll say, "This is your grandfather," so and so and so.
Do you still?
He would write letters.
Do you still have those letters, Sister Khalila?
Yes, I have my letters. Yes.
What?
I have my letters.
Could I possibly see? Could I see one? Could you?
I don't have those with me, though, brother. I don't have that with me. Hold on for 1 minute. Hold on.
Wonder where she would have them if she doesn't have them with her. Where would they?
Probably in Florida.
Hello?
Oh, yes, Sister Khalila.
I'm sorry to keep you waiting. That was my daughter.
Okay.
Calling me from Chicago.
I hear you. So you want to continue?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. Now, did Master Farad speak with an accent? What was his dialect like? The sound of the tone of his voice.
I'm gonna be honest with you. He told me he was born in Karachi, Pakistan. So he had a Pakistani kind of accent. But he can speak his language is Urdu, and he can speak Hindi, and he can speak a lot of other languages. But he has the Pakistani accent.
Like a lot of Pakistanis that's in this country now. We know how they sound.
Exactly.
Okay, because
that's the way he sounds.
Okay, the typical Indian type of.
Yeah. But sometimes he can speak. When he speaks English, he can speak as clear as we do. He can speak as clear without a dialect. He was very good. He was a master of all languages.
Now, what about?
He can speak. I've heard him speak just as clear as I do.
I hear that. Now, what about your former husband, Muhammad Ali? Did Muhammad Ali ever meet Master Fard Muhammad?
Not with me.
Not with you. Maybe through Elijah Muhammad on his own.
If he met him, I wouldn't know about it. Because I've never seen him with him.
Okay, I hear that.
Oh.
I hear that. I wanted to ask you, Sister Khalila, can I use that photograph with you presenting the cake to your grandfather in the film that I'm trying to make? Can I use that photograph?
Sure you can. Why wouldn't you?
I have permission.
You're a man of history. Why wouldn't you? Of course, you got my permission.
And I would like to, put your name, under the photograph and describe that photograph in my little film that I'm working on. So, you know, I would.
Mind.
You don't mind?
No.
Okay, that's fine. All right, let's continue, sister. What ultimately happened to the man in the photograph as Fard Muhammad, also known as Muhammad Abdullah? What ultimately happened to him?
Well, he passed away. Passed away.
Did you go to the funeral?
No, I couldn't go at the time. I was out of the country.
Okay.
That happened. And I come back, and I find out when I come back it was an after fact.
Did you?
But I had letters from grandmother, his wife.
Apparently, the late Elijah Muhammad only let a few select people whom he could fully trust meet Master Fard Muhammad. The late boxing champion Muhammad Ali was another person who was in constant contact with Master Fard as early as his first fight with Sunni Muslim. Ali spoke to Fard on the phone on a daily basis.
I'm great. I don't have a mark on my face, and I upset Sunni Muslim, and I just turned 22 years old. I must be the greatest. I told the world I talk to God every day. If God's with me, can't nobody be against me. I shook up the world. I know God. I know the real God. I talk to God every day. If God's with me, can't nobody be against me.
It is painful to think that Master Fard was watching from afar the escalating family feud between his once assistant, Elijah Muhammad, and Elijah's once faithful servant, Malcolm X. A family feud that led to one man's murder. If Master Fard truly had any power, perhaps he should have stepped in and prevented Malcolm's assassination by calling time out between the fighting men. To think that throughout all history's chaos that black people had to endure since Fard's supposed disappearance, Fard was right here in the United States all along. It's enough to send chills down one's spine. Some may argue that Fard did the best he could in raising the consciousness of black people to the evils of white America. He was indeed incarcerated for his revolutionary manifesto in the past. If he came forward to step in between his two feuding students, would there be a price to pay? By remaining silent and not acting as peacemaker, he could avoid the charge of being an accessory to murder and again put behind bars. Playing God can literally put you between a rock and a hard place. Barry Gothard, a journalist, became an aide to John V. Lindsay, mayor of New York, in 1965. As a member of the Lindsay administration, Barry's job was to keep City Hall aware of potential explosive situations before things blew up and got out of hand.
24 persons, most of them youngsters, were arrested today in the second day of rioting in Brooklyn over alleged school segregation. Some 300 Negro teenagers and youths ran wild through downtown Brooklyn, battling police, smashing windows, and terrorizing pedestrians.
Historically, racial tensions between blacks and whites were a given. A former Nation of Islam member named Clarence 13X was a force to be reckoned with when he was kicked out of the Nation of Islam and formed his own secret society called the 5%ers. Clarence 13X, at the raise of his hand, could stop a riot of black youth or start one. The city of New York was concerned. It wasn't just the mayor of the city of New York who was worried. The same sentiment echoed throughout city halls in every major city in the United States, and wherever the majority of black folks resided in, usually a ghetto. To be brutally honest, every municipality coast to coast had black occupants that were treated like second-class citizens. Or to be more frank, black folks were being treated like 10-year-old horse manure by white people. Sure, this newly elected mayor didn't want to see his city go up in flames. Mayor Lindsay's main man in liaison, Barry Gothard, would get real close to the man who was once called Clarence 13X, whose new name was Allah. A man self-proclaimed to be God in the flesh. Allah was a heavy marijuana smoker and a habitual dice shooter. A bad combination for the role of black leader. When Allah was questioned about his bad habits, his response was like Rasputin, the mad monk, who practiced what he preached. Rasputin would say, in order to find repentance and salvation, one must sin first. What's the meaning of goodness if there's no badness to overcome? City Hall hired Clarence 13X. That raised the eyebrows of many, and his loyalty to the black struggle was questioned. Clarence 13X, who was born Clarence Smith Jowers, who would up his name to Allah and call himself God in the flesh. Did City Hall co-op him, recruit him, own him, control him? He was on city payroll at the time of his murder, and the list of suspects who murdered him is very long. One of Streetology's School of Hard Knocks phrases of surrender says, "You can't beat City Hall." Obviously, that coin was phrased by someone who worked there. The phrase is usually followed by another one that says, "If you can't beat 'em, join 'em." Many of Allah's followers didn't like his upgrade and payoff from City Hall. When push comes to shove, we all have to put on a suit and tie and compromise. That doesn't automatically mean that one's sold out. The problem is when you put all your energy in that 9 to 5 and have very little energy left for the struggle and can barely even open your mouth to articulate anything about the crisis in your community. In December of 1964, Clarence 13X was shot with a high-powered rifle in the basement of a building that was a gambling spot known as The Hole. The high-powered rifle was a hunting rifle that used a .30-06 caliber round. The power of these two components combined earned this weapon the name the Elephant Gun. And though the bullet from this rifle had Clarence's name on it, Clarence survived the shooting. A elephant gun could take down anything.
I always heard during that period in the early 60s that the father couldn't die, that he was invincible, and that and the major thing that happened that proved that is when he was shot in 64 and survived the shooting, and they said that he was shot by an elephant gun. So we believe that he had these super powers, these powers beyond imagination, and that even made us even more attracted to him. When it came to discipline, he didn't have it. He didn't have that kind of discipline. And in the Nation of Islam, discipline is commanded. You have to take care of your family. You have to make meetings. You have to participate in the propagation of the truth. You would have to adhere to the teachings of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And Clarence liked to gamble. In fact, I remember the brother saying that he would shoot dice. And when he shot dice, 7 is a winning. He said, 7, that's God. That's me, God. And he would win. And he had built a lot of debt as a result of that.
Good music on the jukebox always set the backdrop for the relaxing atmosphere. And it was a sin not to keep a pocket full of coins to help keep the 45 RPM records on heavy rotation. Clarence had no idea how extensively the FBI was monitoring his every move. The 3 main places he frequented was the Glamour Inn, the Urban League Street Academy, and the Wellsworth Bar, which were all situated on the same block. The planted electronic surveillance devices cut through a dense wall of sound that revealed Clarence's every move. They knew by listening where he had been, what he was currently doing, and what he would do next. When Clarence 13X Smith designated himself Allah, incorporating into himself the qualities of the divine God, the Muslims were upset. In one stroke, Elijah Muhammad, messenger of Allah, leader and teacher, was demoted to a follower. He had been shot in the chest in 1965 during a crap game. Allah was constantly gambling, and he was not a good loser. He kept himself surrounded by 5%ers, and when he lost, they would guerrilla the winners to get Allah's money back for him. Most people who gamble with Allah sooner or later had it in for him. He recovered from his wound and told people that henceforth no one could kill him. He had been saved in order to lead his people. God brought me back to life to show his children the way, he said.
And he had some, they said he smoked marijuana. And we smoked marijuana too, so we were his product. So we did what he did.
Marijuana, the smoke of hell, devil's harvest. Laughter and tragedy are often two sides of the same coin, and it's a thin line between culture and confusion. For a people forcibly removed from their homeland and winging it without an instruction manual, the use of marijuana for recreational purposes did not help an already lost people's navigation through hostile territory. Sure, its use dated back to more than 12,000 years, but under the white man's laws, the hard facts were that the 1914 Harrison Narcotics Act prohibited the possession of narcotics, imposed draconian laws on captive subjects, and sooner or later they are bound to rise up and challenge an authority that they may not respect. Clarence 13X would defy many other restrictions placed on him. Clarence's defiance clashed with both friends and foes. It is still a mystery today in 2014 as of what was the real cause of Clarence 13X's demise. Unfortunately, no one gets to hear the father's voice, except for one poorly recorded interview with him that doesn't point out his philosophy. A poorly recorded interview tape that fails to explain what he stood for, what he was against. What would the father say today in 2016 about the candidates running for president for the year 2017? What would he say about the wave of police shootings against African and Caribbean Americans? What would be his stance on the marijuana laws? What would he say about the music being made today by black people? What would the father have to say about President Barack Obama? Would the father work for the mayor of the city of New York? The police commissioner?
These two men have achieved incredible feats against all odds, becoming leaders of legendary status. Their names are Imam Warith Deen Mohammed and Minister Louis Farrakhan.
You can't go before the world strutting blackness. You have to go before the world displaying wisdom and righteousness.
I know that America needs leadership. And I'm going to make my contribution.
The history of Imam Muhammad and Minister Farrakhan is a fascinating story of two great African American religious leaders. Both of them came into prominence in the Nation of Islam under the leadership of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad.
I have been teaching that one day you will wake up to know.
Imam Muhammad was his son. He was called defiant, often disagreeing with the religion his father was proclaiming. At times, he was discommunicated from the group, unable to even speak with Nation of Islam members. Minister Farrakhan was different. He was Elijah Muhammad's greatest student. He was charismatic and articulate, with a level of intelligence profound as any.
Then the people began to say, yes, yes, yes.
He studied Elijah's every word and loved him like a father. In 1975, when the Honorable Elijah Muhammad passed away, it was Muhammad who was elected to leadership of the Nation of Islam. He immediately began making changes to bring all Nation of Islam members in accordance with mainstream Islamic beliefs. He changed the name of the group to the World Community of Al-Islam in the West and began teaching the tenets of Al-Islam. Although an estimated 1.5 million followers made this conversion, everyone wasn't ready to let go of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad's profound teachings. In 1978, Minister Louis Farrakhan split from Imam Muhammad to rebuild the Nation of Islam.
See, we don't speak of Elijah Muhammad as dead. We don't say the late Elijah Muhammad. How could the man be late when his wisdom is so on time?
His success would be overwhelming.
In the name of Allah.
For years, these two great Muslim leaders would be divided.
Muslims believe in the oneness of God, the oneness of society.
Each in stark contrast to the other.
That kills our grandmothers, kills our babies, shoots us down.
Still, they shared a common thread.
We are raised up to show the world what righteousness looked like. Yes, sir.
A bond that could never be separated, no matter the differences, no matter the time. In February 2002, these two great leaders came together in Los Angeles, California. Fittingly, it would be at Juma prayer during Savior's Day weekend. Thousands would be in attendance as Imam Wallace Deen Mohammed would lead a historic Juma prayer. The two leaders would join in Salat,
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
a sight seldom, if ever, seen by the American public. Following the service, each of these leaders would address those in attendance, showing a powerful display of respect and solidarity.
So Islam today is off the straight path, and some are trying to get back to the straight path and making a mess of it. And they're making a grotesque image of what Islam really is.
The following day, Minister Louis Farrakhan and Imam Wallace Deen Mohammed would meet again, this time at a local television studio, where for the first time in history, they would be interviewed together and answer questions which had been discussed for decades.
I mean, there have been, for the last several years, attempts to reconcile these two groups or brothers of ours. And what has taken it so long?
Let me say that I thank Allah so much for the man that came to try to put us on the road to Islam. The starting point is not the finishing point. The starting point is letting us know that we have a journey. Master Fard Muhammad told us to accept our own and to be ourselves. We know that he, a human being born February 26, 1877, is not the originator of the heavens and the earth, but the good that we gained from his 3 years and 4 months among us was that he raised from among us a man
that would get us started in a process that even though the Islamic world would have liked to have helped us, and many Muslims came to try to help us, they didn't have the right methodology and approach for the condition that we were in. Fard Muhammad developed a methodology, strange as it seems, unorthodox as it seems, even poisonous as it may seem, yet it was a prescription that started bringing balance to the system, and that we would evolve from a nationalistic, black thinking people into the universal message of Islam.
But just to dwell on Fard Muhammad, the idea that he was the incarnation, or he was God on earth, you know.
I differed with my father.
Yes.
And I didn't want to differ with him.
Yes.
In fact, I never differed with him directly. I was told, he was told that someone heard me saying something different. So he called me to question me about it. And I told him that I could more readily believe that he was God than I could believe that his teacher was God, because his teacher was a white man, and he said white people were devils. And also I told him that I understand something from your teacher that makes me believe that he said those things, but he also left enough evidence of his real intent, and that was to bring us to the correct idea of God in Islam. For example, my mother, when I was leaving the home one day, after my father had insisted that I accept God the way he presented God, or I was going to be cut off from all communication. He told me he knew it would hurt me to know that I wouldn't be able to see my mother. He said, you won't be able to talk to your mother, I'll see her. So I didn't change. And as I was leaving, my mother was hurt, and it hurt me to see her hurting like that. She said, she walked me to the door, which she didn't do. That was normal for her. When my father excused you. And she stood on the porch at the door, and she said, Wallace, why don't you go back there and accept this? Just say you believe. I said, Mama, tell me what Mr. Fard told you all. I said, did he tell you he was God? And she looked like her face went blank, and looked like she didn't know what to say. And a few seconds she said, no, he did not. So in fact, he told us to not even call him prophet. Said that was too big a title for him. Then I said to my mother, how can you ask your son now to accept a man as God who told you prophet was too big a title for him?
I see. So I think that is the consistent view that if Master Fard's contribution has been to
Fard was sincere. That's my point.
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
He was very sincere.
Any Orthodox Muslim out of the 1.2 billion will readily accept that. But when there is any suggestion of something related to being God on earth, then there is difficulty. You would agree with me?
Well, let me put it to you another way. That man, Adam, was to be Allah's vicegerent,
Khalifa, yes,
on earth, Khalifa. What does that mean? That means that Adam was to act on the will of God, in the place of God, by God's command, but not to be worshipped as a God, but to show the human being what the human being could become.
Correct.
If the human being submitted to God. He ordered the angels to bow down to this man that he made and fashioned from, in one part of the Quran, black mud into shape, and from another part, from dust. And he ordered the angels to bow down to Adam. All of this is subject to interpretation. And it is interpretation that gives Muslims these points that create division. And I think now that we in the Nation of Islam have accepted Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and we recognize when we were taught to pray, every morning our prayer was, surely I have turned myself to thee, O Allah, to him who originated the heavens and the earth. And I am not of the polytheists. That was our prayer.
Yes.
Our prayer. At some point, we would come into a greater understanding of that. And I would say that we are like children who don't really know God, but know him through a mom and a dad. But as we mature, we see our mother and our father in perspective. And as we mature, we see Master Fard Muhammad and the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and Prophet Muhammad and all the prophets in perspective.
About Colin Ferguson, the man who shot a Jamaican a black male who shot 6 people on the Long Island train. Mr. Muhammad speaks.
Where they set black inmates up in these jails and penitentiaries, and in particular there in Nassau County, and pulled all the black officers out and the black inmates so they could jump on Brother Colin Ferguson, because they were mad with him for catching the Long Island train and killing all them white folks. I love Colin Ferguson. I have no official position, so I can say I love him.
You love a man who randomly killed 6 people on a commuter train?
I love Colin Ferguson just as much as the masses of white Americans love General Schwarzkopf, General Westmoreland, General Patton, General MacArthur, and Eisenhower. America awards her killers, and they get ribbons and stripes and bars. I'm sensitive to the pain and suffering of the loss of life on that train, but I'm one of the rebellious slaves. And so when black people stand up out of pain and suffering and frustration, I understand after 500 years.
You also, you talk about the response of some African Americans to, for example, the book which attempts to prove that the Jews are involved in the slave trade. I'd be happy to let them see that. You talk about when white folks can't defeat you, you said in your speech at Kane, they'll always find some Negro, some boot-licking, butt-licking, buck-dancing, bamboozle, half-baked, half-fried, sissified, punkified, pasteurized, homogenized nigger that they can trot out in front of you. I would ask you, Mr. Muhammad, is Jesse Jackson a boot-licking, homogenized nigger?
To the best of his ability, I believe he tries every day to do that.
Here you are mocking Jesse Jackson at a speech, I believe this is Howard University. Roll the tape.
Oh, boot-licking, buck-dancing, scratching, shuffling, messy Jesse Jackson. You keep. I am a somebody. I am a somebody who keep hope alive. I am a somebody. I don't rightly know who the hell I am, but I am somebody.
Here is just one of the comments that provoked the Anti-Defamation League to take out a full-page ad in the New York Times and other newspapers. What the ADL did essentially was publish in the New York Times some of the things that you said. Here's a part, this is an audio tape, of part of your speech to Kane College last November that created such furor. Khalid Muhammad speaking.
The hook-nosed, bagel-eating, lox-eating, imposter perpetrating a fraud, Johnny-come-lately, just crawled out of the caves and hills of Europe, wanna be you.
Don't you let no hook-nosed, bagel-eating, lox-eating, perpetrating a fraud.
It is remarks like this one that have earned Muhammad his reputation as someone who despises Jews. Everywhere he goes, the former spokesman for the Nation of Islam stirs angry emotions. Muhammad blames Jews for hindering the progress of African Americans. He has been denounced by President Clinton, other black leaders, and even Louis Farrakhan himself.
Minister Louis Farrakhan and the Nation of Islam claim they are moving toward moderation and increased tolerance. Minister Farrakhan spoke in Washington this afternoon.
Recent events surrounding the remarks by one of my ministers is causing intense concern among many people. Brother Khalid Abdul Muhammad spoke at Keene College. During the speech, Brother Khalid made remarks that were not consistent with the proper representation of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, his teachings and guidance, myself, and the Nation of Islam. I found the speech, after listening to it in context, vile in manner, repugnant, malicious, mean-spirited, and spoken in mockery of individuals and people, which is against the spirit of Islam. While I stand by the truths that he spoke, I must condemn in the strongest terms the manner in which those truths were represented.
He has been denounced by President Clinton, other black leaders, and even Louis Farrakhan himself.
I therefore have dismissed Brother Khalid from his post as minister, representative, and national assistant until he demonstrates that he is willing to conform to the manner of representing Allah, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, his truth, his guidance, aim and his purpose for us in America in a manner that would be pleasing to Allah, his messenger, myself, and the nation.
I believe with all of my heart that the white man is the devil, and I must teach that he is the devil. I cannot back down from that. I must teach that he is the devil. Whether you like me or not, whether you accept me or not, whether you condemn me or not, whether you suspend me or not, the goddamn white man is the devil, and I will teach it from the cradle to the grave. Always teach it.
I have an internal and secret document put out by the Civil Rights Division of the Anti-Defamation League this January. This document reveals their strategy for dealing with Louis Farrakhan and the Nation of Islam. The ADL raises the question, does Farrakhan's acceptance by the mainstream black community represent a newfound tolerance for anti-Semitism which the ADL must fight with every weapon at our disposal? What do these weapons include?
Black people who pretended to be close to me started running from me. These Negroes who play hard. But when the cracker comes on the scene, they punk out. Scared of what the white folks gonna say, what the Jews gonna say.
In 1989, over a decade after the demise of Huey Newton's Black Panther Party, the new Black Panther Party was started in Dallas, Texas. A local radio talk show producer resurrected the name and gathered a group of blacks who took up shotguns and marched against a school board official who used a racial slur against black students.
The new Black Panther Party was started when there was no Black Panther Party. It was started
by Brother David Foreman and Brother Aaron Michaels in the late 1980s.
Black gunpowder.
Because they believed in the Panther. They believed that the struggle that Huey Newton and Bobby Seale, who founded the Black Panther Party in the 1960s, should be continued. And that the spirit of liberation, the spirit of revolution, and the program of self-defense and community development should live on.
The new Panthers used the militant rhetoric and confrontational style of the original Panthers, but abandoned their core principle of all power to all the people.
And black power. Yo!
Instead, the new Black Panther Party kept the Panther name, but added a fiery brand of black separatism, black nationalism, and anti-Semitism.
You already know what you want to know.
Their hatred of the Jews stems from a belief that blacks are the true descendants of the Hebrews of the Bible. They also believe that while blacks and Jews have both struggled for equality in America, the Jews have risen and abandoned the blacks. The new party and their militant tactics attracted a small nationwide following during the next several years.
In the beginning, New Black Panther Party held a youth rally, and they invited Tom Metzger, who's the head of the White Aryan Resistance, and they both agreed, the white supremacists and the black supremacists agreed that they should be separate and live their own lives.
Militant and at times hate-filled language has been a core component of the new Black Panther Party since its beginnings. But the rhetoric intensified under Dr. Khalid Muhammad, who became the group's de facto leader in 1998.
And black power.
When the new Black Panther Party teamed up with Khalid Abdul Muhammad, who was a former NOI spokesperson, the hardcore anti-Semitism and racism really became part of what was attractive to a lot of people about the new Black Panther Party.
Khalid was the national spokesman for the nation's leader, Minister Louis Farrakhan. His outspoken rhetoric made him a hero to some young members of the NOI.
Khalid Muhammad was a firebrand, he was charismatic, he was powerful, he resonated with young black people, he resonated with the hip-hop generation. He was a force to be reckoned with in many ways outside of the Nation of Islam.
I say to the Jewish people,
The Nation of Islam, a religious organization, was founded in 1930 and claims to promote Islamic beliefs and black pride. But in 1993, Khalid brought pressure on the organization when he gave a speech at New Jersey's Keene College and referred to Jewish people as bloodsuckers and the Pope as a cracker.
Perpetrating a fraud just crawled out of the caves and hills of Europe. So-called Jews make you believe that you are not the chosen people of
His
God.
remarks were so strident that Khalid was censured by the U.S. Congress. In response to the public outcry, Minister Louis Farrakhan suspended Khalid from the leadership of the Nation of Islam.
I found the speech vile in manner. The Nation of Islam wanted him to tone down his rhetoric, and Khalid Muhammad found a space where he could say what he wanted to say without someone telling him that he needs to tone down his rhetoric, and that organization was the New Black Panther Party.
Wake up, lead up, and stand up.
In 1998, Khalid became the de facto leader of the new Black Panther Party for self-defense.
Quran says, "Oh, you who believe, do not take the Jews and the Christians for friends. They are friends of each other, and whoever amongst you takes them for a friend, then surely he is one of them. Surely Allah does not guide him." You can clearly see. Look at goddamn Farrakhan sitting there with that lowly ass Jew. Now look over here. This one is very important. Y'all know who he is? That's Flegger. Flegger, Jesuit order of the church. He's a Jesuit priest. Check it out. Let's connect these niggas. Check them out. There you go again, Farrakhan and Flegger. Now let me go a little further. Look at Farrakhan at the United Nations, right? You know what United Nations stand for. These damn devils he up here begging. Look at this man over here. Shabazz, right? So we can clearly see, why would he be sitting up at the UN? Is he in there talking about Darfur?
Is he in there talking about them damn white Arabs over there enslaving Africans? Hell no. He in there begging them. Okay, that's Darfur. He not in there talking about Darfur. Let's go on. Right here. Never again. A new pledge for the Jewish community. The Quran clearly says, whoever takes the Christians and Jews for a friend is an abomination. The Quran say. Look at Farrakhan sitting there, goddamn puppet to these damn Jews. Look at him. There you go again with these goddamn Jews. Take a look. I'm not making this shit up. He's in bed with the Jews.
In the supreme wisdom lessons of the lost found nation of Islam, we are told that you cannot reform the devil. The question is asked, and can you reform devil? And the answer said that all of the emphatically no. What did it say? No.
Minister Farrakhan, yes. Dr. King dreamed of the day that children will be recognized by the content of their character, not the color of their skin. Do you see a day when whites will be allowed to join the black Muslims?
Yes. Yes. There, you know, I must say this. Some of my own brothers may be shocked at this, but you asked me a question, and I have to answer you truthfully. If you look at the message of Jesus, it started first very narrowly among the lost sheep. And Jesus was told, go ye not in the way of the Samaritans, or in the way of the Gentiles, but to the lost sheep. And then at a certain point he said, go ye into all the world, to every nation, kindred, and tongue. If you will look at the message of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, it first was directed to black people because we were in the worst condition. But not only are we lost, the whole human family is lost, and therefore the message has to evolve, and we have to evolve. And I'll close that point by saying, in Christ, there is no Greek, no Jew, no bond, no free, no male, no female. This means that we all are going to have to grow out of rabid nationalism, sexism, racism, materialism in order to claim Jesus Christ as our Lord and Savior.
My dear father, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, when I was blind, deaf, and dumb, you came after me and lifted me up from the graveyard of the white man's ignorance. And as it appears that you have deviated from the path of the most honorable Elijah Muhammad, it is my divine duty to come after you with the truth of Elijah Muhammad as you came after me. You're not going to save this beast. In the supreme wisdom lessons of the lost found nation of Islam, we are told that you cannot reform the devil. The question is asked, and can you reform devil?
Yes.
And the answer said that all of the emphatically no. What did it say? No. It says emphatically no.
There are some white people who want to escape that history and try to be better than their fathers. I don't fault them for that.
Oh, dear Father, have you forgotten the lesson? The lessons say emphatically no. It says all of the prophets have tried and none of them were successful.
We all are going to have to grow out of rabid nationalism, sexism, racism, materialism in order to claim Jesus Christ as our Lord and Savior. Not only are we lost, the whole human family is lost, and therefore the message has to evolve, and we have to evolve.
And there are some white people who want to escape that history and try to be better than their fathers. I don't fault them for that.
Who do you think you are that God has come to destroy this goddamn bastard and you will get in the way to try to save this bastard?
Yes.
Hell no. Hell no. You get in the way of God's wrath.
Why wouldn't Jesus and Muhammad be honored with this multiracial presentation?
Hell no! Hell no!
If you notice, Phil, Muhammad started among Arabs. And then the message spread into Africa, and then into Europe, and then into Asia. So if you look at the world of Islam, it is not a world that is just black. It is black, brown, red, yellow, white, the whole human family.
But your world isn't.
Yeah, my world starts with the black man. But it doesn't end there.
Hell no! Hell no!
And I was saying that every day there are more and more Hispanics, Native Americans, Arab Americans, Asian Americans, and white Americans who are attracted to the message of Islam. They couldn't be attracted to a black message, but there had to be a black message to give us love of ourselves again, root in ourselves, but that was a medicine. But after you've accomplished the results, you don't keep taking the medicine.
Critics are saying, oh, Farrakhan talking all this black talk and went over to this white man, L. Ron Hubbard. You know, all the prophets taught us to seek truth. From the cradle to the grave. He said, wherever knowledge is, you should seek to be a possessor of it. You know, some of you went to school. You went to college, didn't you? Some of you, were all your teachers black? You didn't go there to join their race or their ethnic group or to condemn them for being white or Asian or Hispanic or black.
Therefore, the message has to evolve. And we have to evolve.
Islam is magnificent. It's beautiful. We search the scriptures, as you will see and hear today, and we come up with wonderful teachings from the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, and God himself has guided us. But I found something. But I found something. But I found something. In the teaching of Dianetics of Mr. L. Ron Hubbard.
The characteristics of the white man is evil. He was made like that through nature, now we say. Naturally, he was made like that.
And I thank God for Mr. L. Ron Hubbard. And I thank God for his research and teaching. He's gone on now. So if he was a racist, that went in the ground. If he was a hater, that went in the ground. If he wanted nothing to do with black people, well, maybe that's in the ground, but his word was that this teaching that he had would find prominence once it was exposed to black people and black people laid hold to it. I am not in a disagreement with that. We are now inclusive of all members of the human family, but it started with the black man of America and woman who are in the worst condition of human beings.
So you have white American in your organization?
Some, yes. We have Hispanics, we have Native Americans, we have some Asians now in the Nation of Islam.
He won't forgive Khalid Muhammad, but he'll let a goddamn Jew kiss him in his goddamn mouth. Huh? I didn't make that shit up. I'm just bringing you the facts.
Hell no, I will never go along. Hell no, I will never go along. I will never go along. When you tell tell them to stop calling the white man the devil. A whole generation has grown up that did not know that the white man was the devil. Another generation has gone to sleep that used to know that the white man was the devil. I will never go along.
A black man cannot be a racist. A racist means to have prejudice plus power. You cannot show me where whites were in prison, where they were discriminated against, where they were denied opportunity against because of his words. His words were spoken out of pain and suffering for an oppressed people. They're two different standards.
Black power! Black power! Black power! Black power!
Minister Khalid Abdul Muhammad made his transition to the ancestors.
Black power!
Black power!
Khalid died in 2001 of a brain aneurysm, but his teachings and beliefs still guide the new Black Panther Party.
And he'll be the devil tomorrow. Black power!
Dr. Khalid Abdul Muhammad will always remain our mentor and always remain our ideological standard bearer. He is the master teacher of black nationalism and Pan-Africanism and revolution in our midst. Even though he's not here, it is our duty to carry his word and legacy on. He not only talked about it and talked the talk, he walked the walk. And he organized and stood up black men and black women, and he never cowed down in the face of opposition.
On February 17, 2001, Khalid Abdul Muhammad died. The cause of death was said to be a brain aneurysm. A close friend of Khalid named Steve Coakley, who was an American political researcher, has lectured on Khalid Muhammad's sudden death and concluded that foul play was involved. Could Steve Coakley prove it?
It's not what you know, it's what you can prove.
Word on the street is that Steve Coakley could indeed prove his claims about Khalid Muhammad's demise, but Steve Coakley's life was threatened if he continued to lecture on Khalid Muhammad's death that Coakley said was murder.
It's not what you know, it's what you can prove.
I, Omar Shabazz, went to Khalid Muhammad's wake at the Unity Funeral Home in Harlem, New York. And when I walked up to Khalid Muhammad's open casket, I didn't want to believe my eyes. What I saw sent chills down my spine. It was apparent that the undertaker of the funeral home could do nothing on earth to get off the fixed, sardonic grimace of horror and pain that was locked on Khalid Muhammad's face. As I stared down at his face, the first thought that entered my mind was, oh no, somebody did something to him. The look of horror that was etched on Khalid Muhammad's face was grim and mocking. It was as if someone wanted to send a message to say, look what happened to him. It looked to be intentional. I will never forget the scornful look that was locked onto Khalid Muhammad's face. When I left the funeral home, I asked others if they agreed on what I saw, and they all agreed. A week later, when I returned to Harlem, I spotted on the street Queen Mother Dr. Dolores Blakely, who I saw seated inside the funeral home, seated close to Dr. Khalid's coffin, the day I attended the wake. She too agreed on what I mentioned to her about Khalid's bizarre appearance. Does anyone out there in YouTube land have a photo of Khalid Muhammad lying in state? A photograph of Khalid as he looked at his wake inside the Harlem funeral home will speak volumes. It's said that a picture can speak 1,000 words. We need to see a picture of Khalid Muhammad.
It's not what you know, it's what you can prove.
Assassination Science. Acoustic Evidence. Subject, Dr. Khalid Abdul Muhammad. Report prepared by Omar Shabazz. Date, June 1, 2001. There is visual evidence that point out peculiarities in Dr. Muhammad's last speech at the Harriet Tubman School in Harlem, New York on February 10, 2001. This report will deal only with the acoustic aspect. There are peculiar extremities in Dr. Muhammad's vocal delivery. It is noteworthy to point out from the outset that in nowhere prior, during, or at the conclusion of Dr. Muhammad's speech does Dr. Muhammad publicly announce and forewarn the listening audience that he is under the weather, has a sore throat, sick, or suffering from some type of ailment that may impede his vocal presentation. Historically, most speakers and orators who speak before an audience normally and usually forewarn the audience in advance if he or she is having problems with their pipes. This happens with singers also, often preparing the audience in advance in case they hit a bad note. Dr. Khalid only asked the audience to excuse him twice midway through his speech, not at the outset nor at the conclusion of the speech. He offered no explanation for his faulty vocal performance. It is my conclusion, speculative or factual, that I believe that it was even to Dr. Khalid Muhammad's surprise that at one point during his speech he may have suspected that something was seriously wrong, but he couldn't put his finger on it. Is it possible that Dr. Khalid Muhammad was given some exotic poison, and that the vocal problems he exhibited were the reactions of a poison in its first stages? I have seen and heard Dr. Khalid Muhammad numerous times, and not once did I ever hear his uniquely strong voice crack or strain under any circumstances. The opinions expressed here are solely mine. You will have to draw your own conclusion after hearing this presentation of acoustic evidence. El-Shabazz. While Dr. Khalid Muhammad is speaking, observe these vocal anomalies in Dr. Khalid Muhammad's voice. Raspiness, tonal shifts, dynamic suppression, dry fuzziness, octave limitations, tonal shifts from soprano, alto to tenor, changes in pitch, closing of his vocal cords, sniffing, coughing, voice quivers, bad notes, voice changes, restricted vocals, dry notes, distorted sounds, gruff sounds, wavering of the vocal cords, nasal sniffs, voice crack-ups, dry coughs, collapsed vocal cords. The documentaries by Shabazz Productions address these types of questions and, more importantly, provide answers. Shabazz Productions, a film company with a no-nonsense, grassroots approach.